Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. Mixing is hard. That's probably why you clicked on this video. Well, I'm a multi-platinum recordist and mix engineer. I work with some of the biggest names in music in the world, and I'm going to give you the advice that you need to become great at mixing. But I'm going to give you the warning, I am not going to be sugarcoating anything. This is going to be a realistic look at what you need to do if you want to become great at mixing, which brings me to my first bit of advice, number one, which is mix a lot. I know we want shortcuts. I know we want to be able to just sort of snap our fingers, buy certain gear, wave a magic wand, and suddenly be great at mixing. But in reality, that's not going to happen. You need to be practicing. It is a skill. When I first started out, I was getting my hands on every record I could possibly find track outs for and just mixing for hours a day. And that is how I started becoming good. Number two, get involved with more experienced engineers. There's no better experience than hands-on experience. So if you can get into the studio with some more experienced engineers, maybe even hit up some well-known engineers on Instagram or Twitter or whatever we're using these days, and ask questions and get information, get steered in the right direction. When you first start out, it kind of feels like you're in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight. You don't want to just start swimming in a random direction. You might be swimming further out to sea. So get involved, hit people up. We are actually a pretty cool community. Generally speaking, we're more than happy to give a little bit of advice and direction. My advice, though, would be to use specific questions. Don't just hit up the most famous mix engineer in the world and be like, yo, bro, how do I mix? You're not going to get an answer. But if you have a specific question like, hey, I really like this record and I was curious what you did with this element from that record, you might actually get a really good answer. Number three, pay attention to the producers. Truthfully, as a mix engineer, I've learned a lot more from producers than I have from other engineers. I've learned a lot from other engineers, but the producers are the ones who take on the responsibility. They're the ones who say, this is the sound that is going to sell, and therefore, I am listening to X, Y, and Z. Well, if the producer is listening to X, Y, and Z, and you're the mix engineer, you want to make sure you're paying very special attention to X, Y, and Z, because those are going to be the things that really count. I have learned a tremendous amount from working with great producers. My musicality, my sense of balance, my sense of creativity has increased exponentially every time I'm working with a really great producer. 4, improve your monitoring before buying expensive gear. This is a tough pill to swallow. Gear has a certain appeal to it. Like, oh, I've got this fancy microphone, I've got this really cool compressor, and it sounds so good and so great. Yes, there's a novelty to that, and it's exciting. It's like the first time you go into a really big recording studio. You get this sense of excitement. It feels really cool. But if you work at that studio, eventually it starts to just kind of become your office, and the novelty wears off. The same thing is true with expensive gear. They're just tools. It's like getting excited over buying a very expensive hammer. Yes, it can help you do your job better. Yes, it might look neat and might be a good bragging point, but in reality, what's going to help you in terms of actual physical gear or physical stuff is going to be things that improve your ability to listen. The number one thing that helps you become a better mixer is experience, but the number two thing is going to be just your ability to objectively listen. And I will say this, if I had two choices, either go into a studio with the best gear in the world but mediocre monitoring, or go into a studio that had only stock plugins and nothing else, but it had the best monitoring ever, I would absolutely choose the one with the best monitoring ever. It's going to be a more fun experience, it's going to be a more efficient experience, and the outcome is going to be better. Better monitoring helps you enjoy the process, helps you trust what you hear, and gets you better results. Number 5, understand that many issues we try to solve with mixing are actually better solved with editing. Editing is the unsung hero of making records. Getting things in pitch, getting things in time, going through and doing a clip gain pass so that all of the levels are where you want them to be without the use of a compressor. Going through and taking that time up front may seem like you're adding extra steps to the process, but in reality, you're actually expediting the process overall. There are so many things that just lock into place when you fix the pitch, the timing, and the overall gain and level. It's really unbelievable. And the big one, I think, is actually timing, because I see almost nobody ever talk about timing, but timing is probably, if I were to put my finger on one like magic button that just makes things great, well, that doesn't really exist, but if it had to be there, I would say it's probably timing. Getting used to really listening to the pocket between instruments and vocal and instrument bed and things like that is kind of what separates good from great records. And that might feel like an exaggeration, but the rhythmic component of things and the feel of the timing is like half of the experience of the record. That's just been my experience. 6. Be boring with your balances, be fearless with your effects. Boring balances, fearless effects. What does that mean? That means that when we're starting our mix, be boring. Do not start doing all sorts of crazy EQ moves. Don't do that thing where you search for every annoying resonance on every single instrument and pull it out. Don't start compressing everything. Don't put saturation all over everything. Just do level, pan, and if there's something that really strikes you as being problematic, really problematic, just address that. One little notch here and there, one little booster dip here and there, but keep it as boring as possible and almost make it think of it as like a bragging right to say that I was able to get it this good by doing this little. And the less you can do, the better you are. All right. Now, let's flip that completely. Once we have our basic balances going, then we need to be fearless with our effects. This is our moment where we are going to take things from being good to great. And in order to do that, we have to be willing to go the distance. We have to be willing to turn the EQ knob all the way in one direction. We have to be willing to compress the snot out of something, put another compressor on there and compress it more. We have to be willing to do what's going to beat the end listener over the head with the effect. The end listener is not going to pick up on subtlety. That is something I have had to learn the hard way. And the other thing that we need to also understand is that we as human beings have a kinetic sense. We are extremely, extremely perceptive and sensitive to movement. When we're tweaking something, when we're moving something, when we're watching meters go, when we're seeing the number of decibels increase or decrease, our brain exaggerates it. It pays more attention to the change than the actual net result. And you can prove this by making subtle changes, which you will hear as you are making them, walk away, come back, and suddenly, if you just bypass and unbypass, the difference really isn't that big, right? We probably had that experience before. It's because we're hearing the change, the actual process of changing, not the net effect. So you're going to want to go a little further than your kinetic sense tells you you should. Number 7, don't overthink. I know I just laid like a ton of advice on you, and I know that I make a channel that's full of stuff. There's so much information out there, but in reality, mixing is not the craziest thing in the world. We're really just trying to make things sound and, more importantly, feel good. Yes, there is a lot of skill to it, but the reality is that skill comes over time and practice. Once we're actually in the mix and doing it, our skill level is not going to increase from 5 to 500 over the course of 4 hours. We're going to just do the best that we can in that moment. So when we're in that moment, don't overthink. Trust your gut, just go with it. Even if things look weird, try not to look at stuff. Just say, okay, this feels good, stop, move on. All right, my last bit of advice, number 8, is a little bit dangerous, but I think it's important. And that advice is, don't be afraid to lose clients. This is a tough pill to swallow because if you're at the point where this advice applies to you, it means you're probably bridging that gap between aspiring professional and professional. So maybe you're semi-pro, you're doing it for money but as a part-time gig, or maybe you just got a position as an assistant or an in-house engineer and you're trying to cultivate clients, right? You need those clients in order to make money and pay your bills. So when I say don't be afraid to lose clients, that is way easier said than done. But let me give you the big long-term perspective from somebody who's been doing this professionally for 18 years. You're going to lose clients no matter what you do. It does not matter how good your mix is. It does not matter how great you are in terms of interacting with people. Clients will drop off. What's important is maintaining and retaining the long-term clients. The long-term clients are the ones that make your careers. I have clients that I've been working with since before I was a professional. So meaning like I'm talking over 20 years. The long-term clients are the ones that make careers. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you're mixing, you have to trust and lean into your own sense of aesthetic. You need to do what you believe feels right. Yes, when you do these things, you will oftentimes rub producers and artists the wrong way. And I'm not saying that you should go against their wishes. You should be trying to fulfill their view and intention of the record. But you need to trust your own aesthetic in the process, and you need to weight your aesthetic more than their aesthetic. And I know that that sounds weird, and actually you can make legitimate arguments against that statement, but I'm going to say this. If you develop and lean into your own aesthetic, you may lose a lot of clients, but the clients that you retain are the ones that are going to want to come to you specifically for the things that you're willing to do. Your willingness to replace a part or change a sample or whatever it is that your aesthetic demands that you do is something that only you can do. So the clients that like what you do are going to stick with you longer, and one long-term client is worth 20 short-term clients. It is that disproportionate. So do your thing and cultivate the people who like what you do. All right, if you want to get more advice, get hands-on learning, hop on over to WeissAdvice.com and become a Weiss Advice member, because you're going to get access to my full library of full-length tutorials on topics like compression, EQ, reverb. You're also going to get access to the weekly live webinars where we go over records that I am mixing or have mixed, or records that you are working on, so we can discuss ideas in real time and you can actually see the process happen as if you were a fly on the wall. And you can get a discount on one-on-one coaching sessions if you want individual attention. So with all that in mind, hop on over to WeissAdvice.com, become a member, sign up, and I'll see you in my exclusive Discord. Now, if you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. I always mess up these endings. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.